I lost my husband to suicide in 2005. And it was a very lonely and difficult experience. Now that I've had the opportunity to get to a later stage in my life, I realized that I didn't want anyone to have to go through what I went through alone, or to feel as though they're the only ones who have had the experience. And
Hi, Julianne. I'm so glad that you're going to share your story with our viewers. If you could just maybe share with everybody a little bit about what it is that you do.
well, thank you for having me, Natasha. It is a pleasure to talk with you from halfway around the world. Isn't it? It's just wild how we get to do this now. But I am a healthcare consultant. I am an author, speaker, and a certified grief educator. Well, with that, I help people in the mainly long-term care, like skilled nursing and hospice arenas, with their business management and business development and that kind of thing. But really what my passion lies with right now is I retired from the healthcare industry about 2 years ago, from an operational basis, to really talk about grief and mental health. And the reason why is that I lost my husband to suicide in 2005. And it was a very lonely and difficult experience. Now that I've had the opportunity to get to a later stage in my life, I realized that I didn't want anyone to have to go through what I went through alone, or to feel as though they're the only ones who have had the experience. And if my husband maybe would have felt more comfortable talking about his mental health, maybe he would have been able to feel more comfortable getting treatment, and maybe he would have also not felt that it was a diagnosis that was going to be life-limiting.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. So, tell me just a little bit of background. What got you into the healing? And then we'll get to because I know you wrote a book about that. So I'd like to discuss that as well. Just tell us a little bit more about what got you into the healthcare system and all of that in the first place.
Sure. So I went to college and was not quite sure what I wanted to do, though I had a couple of different passions that I was in my mind. One was being like a school counselor, psychologist for children, and the other one had to do with taking care of the elderly. And it just so happened that that's the opportunity that came my way. The reason I had interest in that is that my great grandma came to the United States in the early 1900s as a result of the Armenian genocide. And, she was one of the few family members that made it here alive and established a life, obviously, but really talked about it all of the time. And so she had the terrible experience of falling and breaking her hip and being placed in a nursing home. Now, nursing homes are not terrible places anymore, and they weren't terrible then, but when I was little, and I was probably 8 or 9 when she was admitted, my grandma and my great aunt would complain about all of the things that were going wrong. She was wearing somebody else's clothes. Where were her dentures? She had a scratch, that kind of thing. And she really was my hero. And so I would be so sad every week when we left visiting. So I decided I wanted to make a difference with the care of the elderly and the infirm. And so that is what got me into having interest in the skilled nursing home piece of healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some terrible stories in the nursing homes.
And that is, every one of those stories is terrible, and it should never happen. I will say that most people that are working in the skilled nursing, they just love the elderly, and they give up so much, and they could get paid so much more doing other things, but they are really devoted. It's just that, just like every other occupation, there's bad people in the world, and when that happens, it's terrible because it's a person. But I do want to say that I think it's changed so much. I even know I did that for 32 years, and I can see now when I started to where it is now, all of the improvements that have been made, and that just makes me happy.
Yeah. You know, I often find that if something bad happens, a good way to heal it is just to pay it forward. You know, how can I prevent that from
Yes,
happening? So it's not actually in vain in the bigger picture. It's almost like
yes.
I will sacrifice myself to, you know, further it in another way. So tell us about your book. It's called Griefquake. I see you're quite high ranked on Amazon. That's great.
Yeah, I was really, so I wrote my first book, Head Above Water, which is really the story of, what happened with my family, my husband and whatnot. And it gave an idea about some things that I did to get through that. And so then I realized that grief, and I became a certified grief educator. I realized that grief was caused by so many more things in our life than just losing a loved one. Now, not just like that's an easy thing, but there are so many things that cause us to have that reaction, like losing a job or a divorce or having a health outcome that we weren't expecting and our life changing. And all of that is grief. So I felt like I needed to talk a little bit more about how we could take all of these experiences in our life and find a way through them, because we don't ever get over them. They don't go away, but there are ways that we can integrate it into our life so that we can have a life that we are satisfied with and that we love, even if things don't turn out the way we planned. So Griefquake is really, I was driving and I had this idea, which I know is from God. And it was because where I was driving, there are earthquakes that happen there. And it just made me think of how earthquakes and grief are so similar, how they happen unexpectedly, how you have aftershocks, how you have to rebuild. And so that's where that book came from.
Yeah, I not sympathize, it's the wrong word. I empathize because I also lost my first boyfriend, also committed suicide. And it's not something that anybody actually understands. And it was years after we'd broken up, but and you never get that closure. And it's almost, I don't know, it's like you want to ask questions and then you can't. You can't ask. You can't say, would I have been there for you? So how do you come to terms with it? What is it that you did?
Well, I am sorry that you have also had the experience, because it is just brutal
Yeah.
to lose someone, and then to lose them by suicide. I spent a lot of years really in that sort of coulda, woulda, shoulda. I feel like I did, and my pastor at the time told me that I did far more than he would have ever advised me to do in terms of trying to get my husband help and forgiving him for things and whatnot. But he actually told me after my husband passed that he felt that was a path God gave me so that I wouldn't have a lot of regrets. But I do have a lot of regrets, because that is, I think, is what happens with us as humans. And we think back, and we also want to think that we can control everything. And unfortunately, we can't. So I finally got there, but it's taken a while for me to really step back and understand that, suicide is a decision by the person who takes their life. And, I interrupted my husband's suicide plan a couple of times before he was successful, and he still tried and was successful at one point. But I think that we just feel like there was more we could do. If we would have done this instead of that. And it just takes time to come to peace with the fact that you can't change someone's mind.
Yeah. Because ultimately it's their choice and it is their life. I think, and I hear, I mean, if you are on the other side, a lot of them people wish they hadn't done it, but then it's too late. And
Yes. Yes.
I think a lot of it is also what from the work that I've been doing is that once a person's left and you're trying to communicate with them all the time, you're not actually giving them the space to move on. So you kind of keep them trapped, and by keeping them trapped, you're keeping yourself trapped in the grief. And a lot of it is to do with letting go your own maybe survivor guilt or feeling like you should have done something more, and forgive yourself and know that you're not all powerful and that you can let that go and that thereby let them go.
I think you just mentioned the true key, which is forgiving yourself because of the guilt and just the pain. And then for me, I had two small kids, and having to really watch them grieve was just horrific. But we do take on so much that doesn't belong to us in terms of the emotional piece of suicide. And even sometimes even losing a job or something with your health. Because the reality is that sometimes things happen to our health and we think, what if I would have exercised more? What if I would have had more water? What if, in the end, sometimes you just have to say, I took good care of myself and this happened and it's not my fault.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think, and again, we always do the best we can possibly do, given the situation that we're in. In hindsight, you look back and you can see maybe how caught up you are in the emotional state that you couldn't get a bigger bird's eye picture of it. But you are where you are, and that's okay, because I think every moment in time we're somebody new. So I'm not the person I was 20 years ago, and I'm not the person I was yesterday. And
That's
and
right.
it's just a choice. It's a choice you choose to make. So tell us a little bit more about, I saw you wrote an article about the misuse of is it mobility devices?
Actually, I had a guest on my show. I have a show that's on Apple, Roku, and gee whiz, Fire.
Okay.
I'm like, where is that thing anyway? And it's also online. It's on an app called Phoenix TV. And I had a guest, and I loved talking with her because of my background. But that's what she talked about is as we get older, we use mobility devices. And so again, this goes back to my other passion around the care of the elderly. And right now my mom is kind of suffering with this too, but really learning how we need to position our bodies and keep our bodies moving. But then when we start using things like canes and walkers and wheelchairs, that they are properly fitted and that we have our posture correct so that we don't actually cause more damage. And so, like in the United States here, we have some regulations that govern nursing homes. And one of the things in the regulations that I do love, and I think it's the best lesson, all of the regulations are based on the idea that you use it or you lose it. When we don't walk, then we walk less, and then we don't walk at all because then our legs won't work. And so that's really the lesson, and is to keep moving. And I know that a lot of people experience pain and so on, myself included. What we have to do, though, is remember that we have to keep our body active. And the longer we can do that, the healthier we stay.
Correct. I think people just use an excuse that, they're retired, or, I'm retired now, I don't have to work anymore. But it's not meant to be work. I think as humans, we're not designed to sit at a desk all day either. We're designed to be in the fields or picking fruit or whatever, but actually be moving our bodies, collecting water from the river.
Yes.
Even if it's small things like not using your arms to stand up, to push yourself up from the chair. And I do that, and I know I can feel it. I can really feel my knees. My knees are not strong like they used to be anymore.
I know, right? That's this terrible thing that happens. But, getting older is not for the weak.
No ways. And anyway, I often think so about that, right? You get older, but that's a feat in itself. Just to have gotten older. I mean, it's a statistical thing. So we're one of the not so many, and the older you get, the less there are people in that age group. So what changes have you seen in the nursing homes? Is it more laws that have been passed, or how is it changing?
Well, there are a lot of changes from just the way we provide care in that space, to the type of resident, because we don't call them patients in the nursing home, kind of resident that we have. So, when I look back, when I started, we had like grandmas and grandpas. It's like ladies and gentlemen who, some of them had chronic illnesses. Maybe they had a stroke and they were unable to care for themselves. And some of them, they just needed a little bit more help with their activities of daily living, like taking a shower or going to the bathroom or whatever. But they weren't necessarily really ill. It was just more aging. Now, those particular residents are in other levels of care, like assisted living, and we have what we call board and care homes, which are assisted livings, or in an independent living. Now in the nursing home, we see folks who have, they're 24 hours after cardiac surgery or a hip replacement, or a stroke. We do IVs and LVADs, which is a cardiac thing, the vest that we put on to monitor the heart. It is unbelievable. Many nursing homes are now looking like a med-surg floor in the hospital. The other thing is that we've really moved from a different paradigm in how care is provided. So back when I started, we had a very sort of paternalistic view. We would sort of tell patients what they needed to do. You need to eat. You need to get up. You have to get up. We're going to put you. Now it is more self-determination. And there is good and bad to that. If you're a caregiver and you want to see somebody get better, but they're not doing the things that are necessary, it's still their choice. But I also, we've done so much more training. There's so much more that we know about getting older. So for instance, dementia. We used to do what we call reality orientation. So we would have somebody say, like, I'm waiting for the bus when they're looking out the door. And we would say, there is no bus coming. You need to go do something else. There's no bus. And they'd say, of course, the bus is coming. I need to get on the bus. The bus is just late. Then you'd have this argument with this resident because they had dementia and you were trying to bring them into reality. Now we just say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that bus is late again. How patient are you that you're sitting here and waiting for that bus? And you know what they say? I know, I hope I'm not late to my appointment. And look, this human being is not arguing about being late with the bus, and they're peaceful. So the training and the things that we've learned about aging, they're really being put to use in the nursing home, and it's changed the face of their experience as a resident.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. It's like just acknowledging where they're at in their world instead of telling them that they're wrong. I actually heard a story about a nursing home where they put a bus stop outside, and then they let them go sit on the bus stop, and then they come back and say, oh, thanks, you came back, and then they walk them back inside again, and everything's back to normal.
I love that because where is the progress in telling someone that the bus is not coming? But we did that for a lot of years, for instance. Yep. It's crazy.
Well, we do that to our kids as well. There's no money for that. You're not getting it. Stop crying.
Yes,
instead of saying, you know what, I wish I could buy you everything in this shop. I really wish I had all the money and I would give it to you. And then you just acknowledge it. And they don't need it anymore, right?
Yes.
It's just about being heard.
I wish I would have had you when I raised my kids to tell me that.
It was a book I read when my daughter was young. I used to say to her, if you want your cereal, whatever she wanted, strawberry pops or whatever, I'd say, I wish I could buy you this whole shelf. And then she'd keep quiet. She'd say, Mommy, it's okay. I don't need it anymore.
Oh, okay. I'll remember that for when I have grandkids.
It's just hearing them, and I think, and it's the same because as you get older, it's almost like a lot of people when they get older start talking more about their childhoods and having that memory. Mm-hmm. And I find it very sad that the children aren't involved in their parents anymore. It's like a lot of them are lonely, and maybe just being in that home is also having that sense of having other people around because they're by themselves the whole time.
Yes, yes, it is true. And it is interesting how they do form little families, and a lot of the nurses and folks who make the food and dietary or housekeepers, you would be amazed how much they love these people. And some of them come in on their days off to do their hair or bring them special, just like, oh, they talked about wanting a certain fast food meal and they'll bring it. It's really, that's the part that people don't see, that as a provider I have seen over and over again. And if people saw that, I think they would have a little different view of what's happening in the nursing home.
Absolutely. So what would you tell people about somebody that is retiring that needs to maybe go because they're losing their memory, or they're starting to become unsafe in their own area because they're forgetful? What do you say to a person like that who doesn't want to go to assisted living?
So most people don't want to go, and I don't blame them. I also tell people you shouldn't go to any sort of living situation like an assisted living or a nursing home or whatever it is, unless you need it, because we weren't designed necessarily to live, I think, in a lot of those group settings in that fashion. I think we were designed to be a community, which we've lost, I think, at least in our nation. But certainly, the first step really is finding a place you feel comfortable with and that they feel comfortable with. So I advise people actually to think about it before this all happens. So, for instance, if even, you don't know if you're going to get dementia, or you don't know if you're going to have a stroke and you're going to need a and a lot of nursing homes too, so much of it is short-term stay. So people don't go to the nursing home to die. I would say greater than 50% of people that are admitted to a nursing home end up going to a different level of care. So the first thing I would say to someone is think about it in advance, so that way, if you go and you choose where you would like to be, look at the ratings online, go tour it, go meet the people. Now, I mean, it does change over time, but at least you have an idea of where you might be comfortable going. And I think that takes a lot of the uneasiness out of it, because then it's still it's your choice. And then it's also familiar, so it's not as scary. So I would say the first thing I'd advise is, if you can, and if you have the mental wherewithal, find where you think you want to go in advance. Now, if you don't have that luxury, because most of us don't, because my dad had to be admitted to my nursing homes on and off through the last part of his life. But by the way, he came home, is really just helping up. You're just going to have to, it's a guilt thing. It's just kind of like we talked about at the beginning, is, do everything you can, but then recognize there's a time when you cannot as a caregiver. And if you're the patient, if you have dementia, you may not recognize that you can't. So trying to get someone to accept that may or may not be realistic. But if you're the caregiver, to recognize that there is a time when you need more than what you can give, 24-hour care can honestly kill a person. It's so hard, the physical and mental drain that it can have on someone. So it's okay to get help. And I think that's what you kind of have to get to, which is it's okay to get help.
Yeah, I think so, because they call this new generation the sandwich generation, because there's a lot of people that are looking after their parents and their children. And it's heavy going, just having a child on its own. And it's almost like having a special needs child, because they are adults that had their independence all this time. So they don't like to be told or taken anywhere. So it's fighting all the time as well. And there is a real thing. I mean, they could fall and break something so easily. And I know with COVID, my mom actually was climbing on a ladder just as we hit lockdown. And she fell and broke her iliac bone in her bum. And she was in hospital, and then she was in a step-up program, but we couldn't see her. And that was traumatic for my dad, because he wasn't allowed to visit his own wife, and she didn't have COVID. She was actually just trying to recover, and it was weeks that she was stuck there. And I think that also did a lot for you guys in lockdown, where the people aren't able to see their children or their families. That's very traumatic. So I'm glad there's been a lot of shifting, at least, and maybe it's just that people are starting to become more compassionate in itself. We're becoming more aware. These are people. They all were contributing citizens. They've done great in their lives. They've brought up great children. So why wouldn't they be great people?
I know. I love in a lot of our dementia units and skilled nursing, and it doesn't matter the company, we put in these memory boxes by the door. It's mostly because, our brain remembers us younger. So you put pictures of the person younger and they're like, oh, that's my room. But as for me, as a provider, what I loved is walking and looking at all the boxes and seeing, how did that person live? What did they do? What was their joy? What did their family look like? How many children did they have? I absolutely love that. And you do realize that, while you see them in a place right now where they don't even recognize themselves, they were me and you right now. And they were just living their life and doing all the things that we do. But you don't see them in that particular role. So it's hard I would say, actually, it's easier to dehumanize them around their illness. But, to your point about COVID, it was a terrible, terrible time. And I think what a lot of people don't recognize is that we didn't love not having family members. And that was a terrible thing. And it was a terrible thing as a provider to tell someone they could not come see their wife or their mom. And it was sad. And many of our residents had health declines because they did not see the people that they loved. And this visiting through the window thing, it was heartbreaking. And it made everybody really just so sad that it had come to that. In retrospect, and we didn't have a choice. We were told by the government what we could do and not do. In retrospect, I hope what the government realizes, and this is not a political thing, it's just that we learn more about the illness and about how it affected people. Honestly, it would have been better for someone to see their loved one and risk getting COVID than it was for them to go 6 months without seeing their loved one. And, that's, again, my opinion. But just because that loneliness, it's real. And I watched our residents suffer from not being with their family.
No, absolutely. And I know a lot of homes don't allow animals either. And if somebody's got a pet, that actually helps them. It helps them be more relaxed. It helps them to know that there's somebody they could come home to, whether it's a dog or a cat or a bird, it doesn't matter. And that's so sad as well.
Well, and a lot of centers do have pets that are like, the center dog. And then what I love is some people are so gracious, they bring their animals in like as therapy pets.
That's nice.
And to visit, and it's really cool. It's so fun, and they love it so much. And or just sometimes families, like they have a dog. Like my daughter, she has 2 dogs that go everywhere with her. And it would not be if I was in the nursing home. I know that Love and Archie would probably be visiting, and that's a good thing, even if you have to just kind of take someone in their room and let them close the door with the dogs because maybe they bother other people or whatever. But I agree, animals are a really good thing for all of us.
Yeah.
No matter our age.
Absolutely. So tell me, you're a speaker as well. What do you do your talks about?
I'm kind of all over the board on that. And I think it's because of my experiences are, they're so vastly different. One being a top level healthcare executive. So, and really championing a lot around women in leadership. I just wrote an article in a magazine that talks about women coming together to help with our collective success. Because I think that's something that we're not always great about. Only because we've had a vision of scarcity in terms of us being able to rise in our careers, at least in the United States. But so I talk about all kinds of things, from leadership and management to championing women's issues to being a single mom, because after my husband passed, I became a single only parent. And then, obviously, I do a lot of inspirational work around mental health, and suicide. So I kind of talk about the gamut, and really just motivational things about how do you build resilience. I have a talk called Building a Lifetime of Resilience, because resilience is a skill. It's not something that we're innately born with. I mean, yes, we have those things inside of us, but we have to learn how to use it, and that's how it becomes a skill. So I talk a lot about that. I just spoke in Washington, D.C. about, an entrepreneurs conference around, all kinds of things about being an entrepreneur, the fear, the loneliness, the challenges that you get, not only on the business side, but on the emotional side. So I think I have a wide range of topics, but I love to speak with people. I like them to be interactive, and I hope that when I am done with a speaking engagement, that people feel like take something away, because I know I always take something away from the audience.
Yeah, it's a two-way thing.
Yes.
You can learn a lot from what the audience's response is already,
Yes.
And it does. You do learn from it. They're your guidance.
Yes, they are.
So, and all of those things is definitely an entrepreneurial thing, to have all these things going on. And it's not something you have a choice over. I don't believe people say, you know what, I want to be an entrepreneur. It's almost like, why am I an entrepreneur? How do I deal with it?
Yes, that is true. I mean, sometimes I am like, why can't I just go get a job again? Because being an entrepreneur, part of it is you work more than you even realize. My son pointed that out to me the other day, because it's your whole life is around all these projects, and they sort of don't have a time frame, meaning they don't talk to you at 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Monday through Friday. It's like Saturday, and you're like, oh, or you're traveling to go speak on a Saturday or a Sunday or whatever that is. And so it just sort of fills your whole life, and you don't really get a break from it. But then on the other hand, it's like the most rewarding thing that you can do. So it is, being an entrepreneur, it's like an addiction.
Yeah, it's not a work thing. It's just who you are.
Yes.
It's the way you think. It's in all interactions all the time. You could think, I could make a business out of this, or I could write a book about that.
I know, right?
I should do some reform about there. It's constantly.
I know. It's like we should have a foundation for that.
Yeah. I actually said to someone the other day, because she's in nursing, and she needs to get permission to take leave. And I said, I honestly, I don't know what it feels like to have to ask permission to take leave, because it's my life. Yes. I'm an adult.
Yes.
And to ask permission to get sick. And she said to me, I never thought about it that way. And I thought, well, that's all I think about.
I know, right? But the bad thing is that, you don't ever give yourself permission, right? You never say yes to yourself. But the other thing that people don't understand about being an entrepreneur is when we do opt out of something, that actually means that we cut our income. So,
right.
You don't make people think that entrepreneurs make a lot of money, and some do. Some of us don't. Some of us just make enough that we need, and that's fine. But everything we do definitely is like, well, what choice am I going to make today? Am I going to make the choice to do something where I'm going to have revenue producing work, or is today going to be the day that my passion overcomes my income? And I make that choice probably too much.
And I think people that are in day jobs don't actually get that. They don't understand. Do you think it's possible for someone to become an entrepreneur, or do you think it's something that's latent within them, that they just too scared maybe if they were in a normal job?
Well, I did a normal job for 30 years. I worked I guess for about 25, I worked for someone else. And so then it's really just been since about 2016 that I've been out on my own completely. So I think that there's probably something inside you that says, hey, I kind of want to do that. I kind of want to do that. Once you can feel comfortable taking the risk, because I wasn't in a place with raising children on my own to take a risk to be an entrepreneur, in my opinion. for me.
Yeah.
That was, I couldn't do that now. Now I'm just a serial entrepreneur. And so it had to have been in there somewhere, because it is risk taking. So you have to be able to be willing to do that. And not everybody is wired to take those risks.
Do you think it's something they could learn? I was just tying that in with resilience, because
Yes,
again,
I was going to say, yes, I think it is. I think it is something you can learn, because I actually have had to learn it. I know it was somewhere in me, but I am one of those people that is all about safety and security. Will I be able to have a place to live? How am I going to support my children? I know I need to put them through school, and really being just totally in that mode of, I have to live this plan. And so I think once I had the courage to reach that, or I should say, to jump over that hurdle once, then it's just become easier and easier. And the other thing is, I learned I didn't have to define my success based on just one thing. And
yeah.
I also think there's a lot of that. Not only are we afraid of the financial risk, but I also think that we are afraid that we're not going to be successful and we're going to embarrass ourselves. And I hate to tell you this, but as an entrepreneur, you embarrass yourself all the time. You just have to realize that it's just something you do, and some things work and some things don't, and you just pivot and do what's next. But you have to, like you said, build that skill and allow yourself to have different outcomes.
Yeah, I think you're right there. It's about not having that fear of failure determine your life, because you're sacrificing yourself and your freedom based on an outcome that may and may never happen.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, most people are too busy worrying about their own lives to worry about what you do anyway. So, and if they want to look for stuff, they'll find it.
That's right. And you know what? In the end, if someone can take something I haven't done well and they learn from it and do better, then you know what? That's actually success. But you have to reframe, and I mean, even writing books, I know for me, that was a really big risk. I actually was very private about a lot around my husband's mental health, because he was very private about it, very private about that, very private about the struggles that we had as a family after he took his life. And then I realized I needed to give back and help, and I didn't want anybody to go through that. But what that meant is that I actually had to tell people about me. And that's risky. That's risky for me, at least. So I had to make a decision, and also knowing that I could tell my story and then no one really wanted to hear it, even though I thought they did. And that's scary too. It's like, wow, maybe what I went through doesn't matter. I tell this story and no one cares. So that was, I had to really set myself down and think about that a lot. So I'm grateful that my books have done well, because it's validation for me. And just so people know, you never make any money selling books unless you're really famous. So even no matter if I sell a ton of books, a ton for me still doesn't do a lot, but that's not why I did it. I did it because I really wanted to do mission work around grief and mental health.
Yeah. Well, Wim Hof, his wife also committed suicide, and I think that was the catalyst for him, the Iceman, that he does all those marathons. And I think that was the catalyst for him to also start regulating, because it's all brain hormones, it's chemistry. And if somebody, I mean, they could call it bipolar or whatever. I suppose it would be a form of bipolar if you're in a really, really dark place and you don't feel like you're a burden to others, and you think you're doing them a favor by taking yourself out of the equation. A lot of the time, they're not doing it as a selfish act. They're actually seeing it as a selfless act, because they feel like they're draining the whole family, maybe, or the medical system. And ultimately, I think they are pulling away their life path that they planned. They are impacting on other people's life paths, because something might have happened. But you know what? We keep getting chances to keep coming back, so it doesn't matter in the bigger picture, in the bigger scheme of things. But yeah, I think a lot of people need to become aware of what happens to you as the survivor. because people don't know how to speak to the ones that are left behind. They think that it's comforting to start sharing their story, when in fact that actually just, it undermines everything you're going through. Or they don't talk about it because they don't know what to say. And you just feel like you've got to sit with all that stuff, and it's in your body, and where does it go? And I know I grieved for years and years, and it's only been the last, I mean, it was about 30 years ago, but it's only been about the last 5 years that I could actually say his name without crying. And it's just one of those things that I think if you were able to let it out, if you're able to find a healthy way of expressing the grief, and without feeling, again, it's the acknowledgement, right? Without feeling that there's something wrong with you, or somebody saying, aren't you over it yet? Can we move along? You can't just get over something. You've got to process it. And if you're not allowed an outlet to process it, then it can't be processed. Then you just sit with it in quiet by yourself. So maybe just writing the book for you, do you think that was maybe the part of letting go, of being able to tell
I was talking to somebody about this the other day, how I was never a big journaler. I'm sort of like a math person. I like spreadsheets and math and science. So I'm not really a writer. And so I didn't sort of buy into that journaling thing when they say, just, sit and journal. It was like, yeah, whatever. Well, I really found that writing my first book, I had to relive a lot. And when I did that, I think it was healing. Now, what that meant is it was painful. And I also think with grief, we don't want to engage in the emotions of grief because it hurts. Grief is painful. And I know I delayed my grieving because I was really trying to survive and support my children and do all of that. And so, and the other thing is, it's not a straight line. So there's that too. But with that said, I believe writing the book took me to an even better place in my healing, and I did not expect that, and that is not why I did it, but it is an outcome and a consequence for me that I think was very healing, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. So where can people find your book?
So
you've got two.
My books, actually, so I have one called Head Above Water, which is my first one, and Griefquake, which is the one I just released, which was a bestseller on Amazon. So that was exciting. And then I have my book, You Can, You Will, which is in the middle right there. That is an anthology. I worked with 18 other women, and we all wrote stories about grief, mental health, and resilience. And so that's also, all three of those books are on Amazon. And if you look under my name or my author profile, they're there, or on my website, which is www.juliannewilliams.com. Everything's there, including how to contact me. And then I have Instagram and Facebook and a YouTube channel and all of that. It's all there just to help support people and, do my mission work. And if I can make the difference for one life, but that is how you find me.
Awesome. Is there anything you'd like to share that I haven't asked you about yet?
No, you covered a lot. Wow, you did your research. What a great interviewer you are, and thank you for having me. I think all I would say is that what I've learned is that being a support to other people, being there for other people, learning how to just be and let people grieve, because you said right and wrong things, just to be and allow people to be who they need to be with me has been the most rewarding thing that I've experienced the last few years. And if you have the opportunity to do that, please do, because you will get more from it than you give. And then the other thing is that I do have a blog on my website about what to say and not to say to people who are grieving. So if you're not sure, you can go to my website and grab that, because there are some things. I've done a lot of in-services with hospital caseworkers and social workers, but they're not trained on grief, because that's not what we talk about in our society anyway. And so there are some tips that can help, and I know that I learned a lot going through grief, but also through my training. And if I can help somebody support someone, then that's what we do. So thank you for
That's
having me.
awesome. No, you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the show. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom and your insight. And I look forward to meeting up with you in the future.
I hope so. I can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you for having me.